You to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for. How long is your list?
The Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
The Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
The Panther
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking
die
about
for.
tribal self.
Panther 48.
I'm talking about those living, those yet unborn, and those who are the
How
ancestors.
long is your list?
So the connection with the ancestors is tied into the tribal self.
Panther 48.
What does that mean? That means that the tribal self constantly reminds us
Willing to die for.
that we don't have the
How
right
long is your
to
list?
claim independence.
The Panther 48.
Peace and power. Once again, this is the Panther 48. This your big brother site calling out of Texas. I have with me my brothers, brother Robert Ward Williams, chairman of the San Diego chapter of the Black Panther Party, calling out of California.
Say all power to the people.
And I have brother E, our Minister of Information Emeritus of the Panther 48, calling out of Florida.
Word.
Today, we're going to build on the scientific art of symbolism. And we're going to let Brother E start off and give us our format before we go to building into it. I think it's going to be a beautiful show. Y'all should tune in, pay attention, and hopefully we'll learn you something today. Go ahead, Brother E.
All right. So I want to, no, seriously, my throat was cleared up. So I figured, like we usually do, this is just for you, start off with some definitions, just to kind of get us recentered to the conversation of culture and to clarify some definitions and distinctions and kind of a direction for where the conversation is going. And so these are definitions that they come from, the online dictionaries and whatnot. Some of them, for our purposes, I've tried to kind of hone and point toward what it is, because words will have 30 definitions and they're going in all these different directions, and there'll be just that one that kind of goes the direction that you're looking for. But just a few words, simple words for us, or words we use every day or every other day or whatever. Words like science. Science at its most basic level is just a means to know, or a study of knowing or learning, finding out things that we would contribute to that. But from some Latin word meaning to know or know. Art being the conscious use of skill and creative imagination in the production of aesthetic objects. Words like purpose, which is one of those words I think we kind of take for granted without really looking at what it means, actual definitions. Purpose being the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists, an intent or objective. Reflect is essentially two, it's made up of two parts: re, which means back, flect, which basically means to bend or something that's yielding. So essentially the word reflect means to throw back without absorbing it, to kind of let something bounce off and be apparent or manifest. Design is the organizational structure of formal elements within a work of art. The composition, the details of a picture or a song, lines, color, things like that. When you're talking visual, War would be able to give better examples in terms of music. But again, design is just the elements. If you have a picture, then design is talking about how the lines are used, how shading is used, how color is used in the creation of that picture. One not so used a whole lot in conversation, and maybe it should be, is the word dissonance, which means a lack of agreement. Examples are the dissonance between the truth and what people want to believe to be the truth. Those are that difference. It's called dissonance. An inconsistency between the beliefs that somebody holds and their actions. I think Noam Chomsky used it. I don't know if they coined it or if they picked it up, but the idea of cognitive dissonance, believing, saying what we believe, i.e. religion, saying what we believe versus what it is we do. That's a cognitive dissonance. Don't talk about it, be about it. You're having your words and actions match. When they don't, it's called dissonance or cognitive dissonance. The mingling of sounds or striking the the ear harshly, and that's more of a musical specific term, but it fits when you take it back as a sort of a metaphor or something along those lines, an analogy at looking at the reality around us. So basically mixing up sounds that just don't hit the ear right, as opposed to music, which is resonance, more of a resonance, and dissonance would be what we call noise, because it's just sounds that don't go together, that it just hits our ear wrong. And then finally, culture, for all the ways of life, the arts, the institutions, social behaviors, and habits that are passed down from generation to generation. It's essentially the entire way of life for a society. These are the people, the ideas and beliefs, the institutions, everything that a society or a group, a civilization uses to teach itself about itself from person to person and generation to generation. So reflecting back on the other cultural program or show that we did on culture, I should have had that one to pop up. I might have it on there, but if we just recall that the purpose of the third domain of culture is reflection. This is the stuff we typically, when we talk about culture, this is the stuff we talk about. Artwork and music and all of the things that we can see and identify and say, that's culture, that's culture, that's culture. When you hear about it on TV or hear it in most conversations, we're talking about those topical aspects. We're not talking about the underlying infrastructure that produces those, or even the ideas that produce that infrastructure. We're talking specifically about what we can see, the pretty, the ugly, all of that sort of thing. So again, we start with self, which is essentially, this for you, psych. The Bible says we come into this world an empty vessel to be filled with the knowledge of this world. Okay, so here's our empty vessel. Imagine ourselves as base. Essentially, in scientific terms, to me, the way I've always translated that is to mean that our DNA, the characteristics, whatever it is that our parents have passed down to us through our DNA, through that bloodline, through that connection, is the vessel that we come into this world with to be filled. It determines, the shape. Maybe it's a round vessel, maybe it's a square vessel, whatever. The vessel is the vessel that is presented to absorb and to be filled with the knowledge of the world. The knowledge of the world begins with the ideas that we're given, that we're taught, that we soak up, even right from childhood, right from our first interaction with the world, when we start screaming and crying because we're scared as hell. That's our first introduction to being filled with this world. And so this represents that first step into culture, that first step into reality outside of ourself, which is the ideas, because we're absorbing everything the way our parents hold us as babies or don't hold us, seeing their faces, hearing their voices, the voices of the doctors, the bright lights, all of these things are go toward our understanding of the world around us, and these become our ideas and beliefs and ideologies and all of those things that we're filled with and that the vessel, the DNA, what it is we brought into this world gives shape to. If that were a square vase, then the information being poured, or the water, whatever liquid that is that's being poured into it, would be in a square shape. If it's round, and whatever information is being poured in would be round. So that DNA is giving shape to those ideas and thoughts and realities and whatnot that we're absorbing. It's giving shape to it. And so that's our first interaction. And as we move forward, our interaction takes us to a point where it's no longer just thought. And you can draw this line at any point, because again, this is not linear. This is very circular. You can drop that pin anywhere along the process in someone's life and say, okay, this is where we start interacting with people in a productive sense, in a sense where our environment, my environment and I are going back and forth consciously or through some effort in order to connect, to build, to reach out beyond that single pot, typically based on ideas. Even if it's, you go to the unemployment line, you here because of the same ideas that everybody else is here for. I got to get some money because I ain't got no job. So the ideas, plain and simple, bring us together into whatever type of collaboration with our environment, other people, other things, and we begin building whatever it is that's going to give birth to the next stage in the process. So those are the institutions, those are the schools, those are the jobs, those are the things that most times we don't, even though we see them, we don't really calculate them as a part of culture. But they're the things that give birth to what it is we typically call culture. You know, if it the same or ideas have brought together several people in one room to fight for a certain political cause. Well, this is that one room. This is the interaction of those people. This is the organization that they create. These are the things they go into the community and do, whatever that endeavor is, whatever these people are, black, white, brown, whatever their beliefs or whatever, this is what that represents. And then finally, those interactions give rise to what it is we see, the pretty or ugly. You know, it's where our like and don't like really get put on display. You know, I like that flower, it's pretty, or I don't like that flower, it's not pretty, or you know, it's that expression of the culture. It's what we typically identify as culture. It's those the arts, the sounds, the songs, the music. It's all of those things that again are expressions of the underlying, what we don't call but actually is culture, giving birth and being recognized. And essentially it's like when a seed begins to grow into the dirt, it plants its roots and begins to push upward. That push upward into the world and into reality, that's the culture, that's the art that we identify as culture and art and songs and those sorts of things. If we look at that, the arts, the pretty things, the music, the visuals, all of those things that we typically would say, you know, the clothing, the dance, even cooking. If we look at those things and evaluate them in terms of purpose, you know, what is the purpose of what it's showing us? What is the purpose? This is where symbols come into play. You know, the symbols of the church are a result of the infrastructure of the church, the buildings, the people having conversations, the organizations, the organizing. That is a result of the ideology that has brought these folks together in a single place at a single time, or not, that we've been filled up with over a period of time in this reality. And so again, its purpose is to give reflection back. So this is the general movement. If we follow along and follow the stream of consciousness, so to speak. So a person comes to this world, an empty vessel, is filled with the knowledge over there to the right of the world, which gives birth to interactions in our environment, interactions we like, we don't like, some we pick up, some we throw away, whatever they are. These are the interactions that are then built based off of those, which in turn gives rise to those things that we actually see and say, hey, that's culture. Even the shade, the cars, the styles of cars. If you look at different periods throughout the auto industry history, the way cars look, the amount of thrust, like a sports car versus a sedan versus a minivan versus that lunch kit that war drives. That is still it's a part of the culture. It's an expression of this is what's popular, or this is what the auto industry is wanting to make popular for whatever reasons, or blah blah. That's what we physically identify as culture. And if we look at it, it's actually a result of cats coming together, or people coming together with a particular ideology or a particular goal or objective in mind, which in turn affects the individuals that are involved, those empty vessels, whether they're newborn empty vessels or vessels that have actually got knowledge and information, all except for the people that think that I'm a grown-ass woman or grown-ass man. That culture is turning around and filling that individual up. In turn, that individual affects the arts, affects the, directly, I like this art, I don't like that art. Yeah, let's all get behind driving, a particular type of car, style of car. I like trues and bows and blah, blah, blah. And so it has an effect on those, which turns around. And if there's something in the culture that is particularly expressive of an idea, it affects the people that were involved in creating or producing those ideas, which goes back to each individual within those groups being affected by the actions of that group, which turns around and affects the information that's being filled. I mean, you get what I'm saying? The groups, the institutions affect the information that's going into that empty vessel, which turns around and affects the empty vessel itself. And so I guess I was watching some junk food candy show, and there was this part, those TV shows, those reality shows with all the black women and white women fighting and whatnot and all of that. Where it's crazy how they go on a show and do promos, most of them, some of them do business stuff, I guess, whatever, but the idea of the show is that these usually chicks are popular because they're popular. So they go on a show, do whatever they do photo shoots to promote the show, which turns around and allows them to be on the show. So it's this kind of a cyclical, like if somebody asks you, what do you do for a living? And you say, I get paid. And no, I mean, seriously, what do you do for a living? No, I get paid. It's like somebody having a job where their only function is to get paid. That's it. That's all they do is I collect checks. So it's this empty circle. You don't do anything but get paid, and that's what you get paid for, is for getting paid. And it's this sort of a disconnect from reality. It's like we look at them as if they're producing something, but in reality, all they're doing is producing production. And that becomes the purpose, is to simply exist, to simply float out there without any type of connection. And so all of this becomes symbolic in that it's reflecting back to us because it has a purpose. Culture always has a purpose. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's in our control, sometimes it's not, which is the essential issue with this system and this society, is that by the time our culture, African people, our cultural expressions make it to mainstream, the masses of the people are interacting with it on any type of level, it's lost its meaning. It's like Kente, when them white folks in the White House or wherever they were in Congress were kneeling, and they had the Kente print around their neck. We don't understand and realize that that particular print goes with a particular people, because that is how a particular people are communicating a particular message. It's something that we do as an African people throughout the continent, but that particular pattern goes to a particular people. But because there's a disconnect between what it is we see and what it is it's saying, what it is we are absorbing and what its purpose is, it becomes something that can just be plastered across the screen with absolutely no compass, no direction. It comes to exist for simply the sake of existing. If you say it's Kente print, but it's not telling the story of the Kente people, it's not really Kente print. It's something you printed, you know, to look cute, to make some sales, whatever, but it has absolutely nothing to do with its purpose. So it's still there and has a purpose, but that purpose becomes, if we're conscious enough to realize that what it's showing us is when we see something like that, and when we absorb that and we allow it to exist and we allow it to be associated with us and associate it or associate ourselves with it, is reflecting the emptiness that this society and that we as people and even individuals have become. Because something can exist like Kente cloth, but have absolutely no connection to the Kente people. So it's that disconnect. That's the purpose, again, of culture, is that reflection of what we call culture. The Kente cloth, and I'm gonna use that, I guess, as an example. The Kente cloth, telling the story of the Kente people, the connection to those people and how they express themselves and all of their culture and how they communicate ideas and whatnot to each generation is no longer there. But we accept it at face value, surface level. All it has to do is look good or sound good, and that becomes something that we absorb. But looking at it, we're absorbing symbols that have absolutely no purpose. And ultimately, symbols, the purpose of symbols, well, not even the purpose of symbols, but how do I want to say this? The direction of symbols, we take symbols in this society, because it is so superficial, to be meaning unto itself. We take symbols and principles and things like that to be something that exists outside of us. When the reality of it is, when we look at something like Kente cloth or whatever it is, that is supposed to pull something out of us, whether it's the cross or the swastika or, you know, whatever principle or idea, those are to exist to pull something out, not to project onto us, but to pull something out because it is a reflection. We're looking at the cross and it's supposed to reflect something within us to pull out and give and tell us where we are, what our direction is, remind us of our purpose. And when they're empty like that Kente cloth or like the Bad Girls Club or whatever these other shows are, we're existing just in that superficial realm. And so we see the superficial, it pulls out the superficial, we get back superficial, it pulls out superficial. And so it's this cycle of going to work, of getting paid to get paid. We have symbols that bring out the symbols. No, we're not supposed to bring out the symbols. We're supposed to bring out what it is the symbol's supposed to be reminding us of, telling us of, giving direction. And that's the difference between design and art. Design would say, oh yes, it's pretty, it's got nice lines, it looks good or it sounds good, and that's it. Whereas art is a unification of those designs and those symbols, using that creative imagination and linking it up with some type of purpose, a direction, a drawback, a reminder of who it is, where we are, what we're supposed to be, what it is we've been filled with, and the idea of where we're going. Language is probably, and people don't really look at language as an art, which it's kind of not anymore. It is, but it's a dying art. Not enough people are giving mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to it, but so I started to text y'all this, but I said, nah, I like it better when it's just going. I want to ask y'all a question real quick, and I'll put this back up in a minute. Ask y'all a question real quick. What is worse, as a man, as a Black man, which is worse, to be called a nigga or to be called a bitch?
Well, in today's society,
No, to you as a man.
that's what I'm explaining.
Okay.
Yeah, being from where I come from and the way we understand those words in this environment, to be called a bitch is worse than being called a nigga. Even though I understand that culturally, being called a nigga is should be a horrible thing, but we in today's society, in this culture, we've actually created a nigger culture. You know, being a real nigger is a positive thing. Being a street nigger is a raw, hard thing. So nigger has lost its bite. But when you call a man a bitch, it's like the ultimate insult. Those are considered fighting words.
Let me add my part
That's
on
my
that.
answer.
My part on that is, when I think of that is the way I interpreted growing up was typically when you call a black man a bitch in particular, it referred to being a bitch ass nigga. And a bitch ass nigga is basically, for one, we already know that the condemnation behind a nigga, but then when you say you a bitch ass nigga, it just adds another layer on top of that, basically referencing the fact that you don't have any testosterone in terms of strength or character, and will let people just run over you, let anybody run over you. And so being a bitch and a bitch ass nigga from that standpoint was just basically the bottom of the bottom.
True indeed.
So
All right, E, where you going? Where you going, E? Where you going with it?
Well, I'm a first, and I'm maybe last, but to cue in on what you said, but your words, you said it's lost its bite. You
Yes.
called a nigga. Is it that it's lost its bite, or we've become used to being called a nigga?
That's why it lost its bite.
Okay. So
Yeah.
but see, that's still it hasn't lost anything. We just become used to it.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm beating you with a whip, it's still ripping your skin, but you're used to it by now. So it's still ripping holes in your body. You're just numb to it because you that's the way life is. So it's not necessarily that it lost its bite. It's just we're used to the bite, and we don't acknowledge that pain anymore. But yeah, I don't have an answer for it. Whatever answer is copacetic for me. It's just, when I think about even just those two words, one is an attack on our humanity. The other is an attack on our manhood. If you really look at it, call a man a bitch, you're basically saying you ain't a man. If you call somebody a nigga, you're not a human being. For a man, those are indistinguishable. I can't be a human being and not have manhood. It's just not happening because I'm a man. That's my expression of my humanity. So it just struck me as a very profound thing to kind of look at. You know, where's the mindset? Which hurts more, the destruction of our manhood or the destruction of our humanity, and why? And that sort of dynamic and how it interacts. But again, in terms of what we call culture, if we look at cooking, you know, especially with Black women, a lot of sisters may not profess it in that way, but it's considered very much an art, you know, and they call it culinary arts. Most people, I think, approach cooking or eating in general as just, you know, it tastes good, it feels good. And that's the dissonance. That's the break. You know, when you're eating and you're eating to feel good or eating to reward yourself, you start to get into things like obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, because not like Elijah talked about eating to live, we eating to feel good. Yeah, and the worse the world gets, the more we want to feel good. So the more our eating is based on feeling good, it no longer serves the purpose that it's supposed to be there for. If cooking is an art, it's supposed to express to you, hey, this is where your lifestyle is. This is where your health is. And if we look at it, our health is in the toilet. Why? Because our eating habits are based around the superficial. Oh, it tastes good, I'm gonna eat it. Oh, it tastes good, I'm gonna eat it. Oh, it tastes good, I'm gonna eat it. Oh, it sounds good, I'm gonna listen to it. It sounds good, I'm gonna listen to it. It looks good, so I'm gonna fuck it. It looks good, so I'm gonna fuck it. Whatever. It's that idea of circulating on that surface level. And that's what we do. Again, I think the culinary arts are real a good place to look at that, because it is very much the ramifications for doing it are very plain and simple. Like I said, you get into all kinds of health issues that we have, and our eating habits, our ideas of cooking, all of those things. Cooking for African people in Africa was a profound thing. It was respected. it was understood that food is our first medicine. That's how we take care of ourselves first. In this society, that's how we have fun. So there's that disconnect between the purpose and what we see. And it allows us again to run it, and we apply that same idea and that same logic to the things we listen to, the things we say. We say words that have no meaning and can't figure out why it is we can't communicate. That's why I keep harping on words, because as a language, as an art, words now have no meaning other than to exist. We say words like bay and boo and all of this shit, and there's no connection. What the fuck is a bay? Somebody please define exactly what bay is. Don't use a bunch of other slang terms. Define that shit, in some terms that have some type of significance. And we can't do that because the words we say aren't there to convey any type of real meaning or purpose or guidance or direction. It's just there to make sounds. And that same idea, we have to apply that same idea throughout all of the arts, that we're basically casting spells of meaningless realities. It is probably the most fundamental creation of society or civilization is language. And I don't mean writing, because that's what Europeans say. We were drawing pictures that were just as profound in their communication, and we're still civilizations by our standards. So, but applying that same idea of existing just in that surface level and drawing a distinction between what that is, that's fine if that's where you want to be. But when you have an entire society that is reflecting back to you that it only exists on the surface level, our clothing has no meaning. We already talked about the kente cloth. Matter of fact, perfect example of our clothing, us not realizing the reflection that the clothing gives us. Where did sagging pants come from, Psych?
I don't actually know. They say it comes from prison.
Mm-hmm.
They say it comes from prison. I'm not sure if it actually came out of prison or if it was took to prison, because I first saw it on the streets. One of the first places I saw it being boasted about, and it probably did come from prison, because this rap group used a lot of prison symbolisms in their music. They even did videos of them in prison behind bars, and they made this look cool. And there's absolutely nothing cool about prison. But if you look at NWA, and one of the first places I seen and heard that this expression of sagging was from there. Back then it was called the LA sag. And Eazy-E on one of his songs, they would ask them questions. Is there any more questions? And then a chick asked him, Eazy, why you wear your pants like that? And he said, I wore my pants like this for easy access, baby. Yeah. And so that's the first place us as youngsters saw it. But then later, I'd heard that it came out of prison, and it was a way that homosexuals express themselves. Now, I cannot say that now, because in prison, all the youngsters, just like out here, walk around with their pants down and their butt cheeks showing. Yeah, all of them. Now, when we did it, and I'm not trying to justify it or beautify it, because I think I may have stopped sagging around 16, 17 years old. And I remember consciously why I stopped sagging, because I actually wanted to be a man, and I wanted to be seen as a man. And there was a lot of things that I started, keep in mind, not having a father and not having a proper male role model. I was trying to piece my manhood together based on things that I saw around me. So I started, one of the first things I did, but which to me was common sense, was starting to try to drop off the things that I had always done as a child. If I want to be a man and be seen as a man, then some of this stuff I did as a child has to be separated from me. But in my thinking, but when we used to sag, we used to wear shorts and then wear pants over the shorts. And the shorts was up to our waist the way they're supposed to be. And the reason for this, and this is just a story from a book I'm telling. I didn't really do none of this. We used to keep our guns tucked in the shorts, and then the pants would sag, and then we'd have a shirt over the gun. That's why we wore 2 pair of pants. So that's how we did it. Nowadays, they're not doing that. They're wearing some tight drawers with their glutes showing. It looked like they had a BBL, and you can see the whole glute, especially in prison. It's ridiculous. They have on 1 pair of boxers. We even used to make a song. We made a song to shame dudes when they come through with their booty jiggling with their one pair of boxers on and the pants down all the way to their thighs, and they come through, we go to singing one pair, one, one. We sing a song to try to, and these dudes will catch out running, you know, to go cover back up. You know, we sang a song, one pair, to try to shame these dudes from coming through with their glutes jiggling all over the place. So I said all that to say this: it ain't the homosexuals that's walking through prison with the SAG anymore. All of these so-called tough guys are walking through prison with their pants out, and then the SAG has got worse. You know, the SAG is way down to your thighs now, and you got on one pair, and your whole glutes are jiggling all over the place. So that's why I say I can't really tell you. I can tell you what I've historically been told and understood, but based on what I saw myself, it's the so-called straight dudes walking around with their booty jiggling, sagging in prison.
Yeah, and that's the lore that I'm familiar with, and I think most of us would identify as hearing. I don't think there's any other. I don't know. I'm not aware of any other, you know, conclusive, you know, study or historical, you know, breakdown of where it came from. But that's always the lore that I was given. But even if we follow that line, years ago, denim jeans were something that was worn by prisoners. It was not worn by the general public. It was worn by just the prison population. Levi's and all of that, those were prison names, you know, or prison clothing items. And then it made its way into the everyday dress apparel of, you know, your average person. But even from that perspective, if, you know, you take the clothing of the prisoner and now the masses are wearing the clothing of the prisoner, what does that tell you about the masses of the people and their state of being? You know, so we take on, and these are the symbols, and this is why this is, and we need to try to keep it in context of that. Everything we look at, everything we say, everything we do or hear is a symbol, and it's going to bring something out of us, because that's what symbols do. People ran around during the Crusades with a cross so that it would not only identify them to their homies over there, to let them know we're on your side, let's go have this fight with these other folks, but also to inspire those who are marching behind it to maintain their focus on what it is they're fighting for, to bring that up out of them. And so we're surrounded with this, again, with these different examples of symbols, blue jeans, or the musical list, or cooking, or whatever it is, these symbols that are bringing out this superficial lifestyle and mentality. And if we step back and look at it, that's exactly what we have. Nowhere, very few places, let me say nowhere, very few places. And in fact, that's one of the examples when I hear you know, somebody on politician or on TV, they say, well, everybody knows such and such and such, or everybody likes to be whatever it is. When you say everybody, you're saying everybody. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just not true. You can't say everybody wishes you well. That's a bullshit statement because it's not true. But we accept those words of hyperbole as being, it's like, I'm gonna give 110%. No, you're not. No, you're not. It's mathematically impossible for you to give more than your total. That's 100%. So to this hyperbole of, I get that people want to say it real hard. I'm gonna give everything. I'm gonna give 110%. That's the hyperbole. That's the overdoing it to try to make a point. But when that hyperbole of trying to make a point is accepted as the reality, we have a problem. We're making our reality based around hyperbole and exclamation points rather than the statement of what it is that's going on. And we talk in those terms, and it gets us into trouble repeatedly. So again, we have this dissonance between what it is we say and what it is we meet. Relationships between men and women. You know, look at the fact that we can't communicate. What is that saying? Because we're using words that we don't even understand the meaning of, that have been totally removed from their meaning and their purpose, and giving whatever it is I feel like it should mean on the fly, and we roll with that. And that's the totality of this entire system and society that we live in. There's a dissonance between the design being those elements, the lines or the tone in the song, or the words and the rap, the words that it's supposed to say, a difference between that and the way we live. We don't match those two things up. It's like dudes being raised up in suburbia, in a Will Smith, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air type of environment, talking about how they've been struggling on the streets and niggas and bitches and hoes and all of this shit. You're not a gangster. What is that? They say it's like a studio gangster type of thing. You're talking about it, but you ain't never lived it. Because talking about it, it's okay just to do that. It's okay to just to talk and to just say shit, and we'll accept it as the reality. And that's a major part of the problem for us. We have a disconnect, and that's one thing, but we're okay with that disconnect. We're okay with just living on the surface level and not digging into anything deeper, because we don't believe everything means something. We don't believe that. We don't believe that things are telling us this, or we look at things like movies. We look at the Matrix or whatever it is and say, oh, that was cool. That was a fly movie. Well, what is it telling you? What do you know, there's something more there. Dig into it. Simple movies, Alice in Wonderland, simple, even just stupid shit. Minions or whatever that show is. With
the Wizard of Oz and Gulliver Travel, all those was metaphorical movies.
But those are stories that you could arguably say, okay, this definitely has meaning. It's telling you something. It's going where. But if you look at a kid's cartoon called Despicable Me, I'd be fucking damned if I teach my children to sit up and say, hey, you want to see Despicable Me? You want to be Despicable Me? You want to talk about Despicable? Listen to what you're saying. Despicable Me, I'm despicable.
I don't even know what that is.
It's a cartoon, a movie that's real popular. It's got several spin-offs and whatever. The Minions, the little yellow motherfuckers that's doing commercials that ain't saying nothing, but somehow they can communicate some bullshit. But the idea that we're saying this shit, the title of the movie is Despicable Me. I'm telling you that I'm despicable. And then I turn around and can't figure out why it is we have problems with things like communication and interacting. I mean, that's just because we've signed off and said that it's okay just to live in this superficial, you can say whatever, and it is unto itself. Not realizing that all of those words and movies and all of that are symbols, and they're there. Again, culture is a reflection. So if you're drawn to that, it's telling you this is what you're drawn to. This is what you like. This is what you are. This is what's deep down in you. And it's pulling it out, pulling it out. And again, the culture doesn't, we don't just affect culture, the flowers and the pretty things, but the culture turns around and affects us, and then we turn around and affect it. So if it's telling us we're empty or we're shallow, we turn around and throw back empty and shallow. And it tells us we're empty and shallow, and we throw back empty and shallow. And so there's this constant back and forth of being empty and shallow and reproducing that. And it comes through in every aspect of culture, everything. There's not an area of human expression, or I forget what they, was it the 9 areas of human endeavor? I forget
Activity.
Activity. There's not any one of those, labor, sex, politics, economics, that you can't look in, find the symbols, and figure out what it is it's reflecting back and telling you about yourself, or where you are, or where we are in the society and in this culture. And we as a people, not only do we have a culture that is superficial and tells us we're superficial, this culture is controlled and manipulated by somebody else. It's not even us trying to say it. It's somebody else allowing only those parts they like to make it up to the level of what we call culture, song, dance, art, all of that, and defining for us what that reality is. And so because that empty vessel coming into the world and is affected by not just the arts, the song, the music and everything, but those who create it are infested with this, and it goes into that circular pattern, that circular flow, coming around and around again. And because it's somebody else's idea, not of what Black men are, not of what we think Black men are or Black women, but what they think Black men and women should be, because they're the ones in control of it. So even if it's a nice, the Cosby Show or Good Times or any of that, that's somebody else telling us what we should be or shouldn't be. It's not us reflecting what it is we think is of value and having it reflect back to us. It's somebody else intentionally casting out this perspective or this idea through culture as to what we should or shouldn't be. It's a redefinition of our reality. It's a redefinition through our symbols, it's redefining and reprogramming who it is we perceive ourselves to be and what our relationship to the world is. And so as long as somebody else is in control of the language that we use, of the art that we produce, of the music, of the food and the clothing, it's not like somebody else is in control of those things, then they're going to constantly have a back door into our psyche. You know, our first printed languages were pictures for a reason, because those pictures speak. What's the saying? A picture's worth 1,000 words. So those pictures that we would communicate, our written languages were pictures, and those pictures would communicate so much more than a bunch of letters, which are symbols. It would convey so much more quickly, and would speak directly to that inner self. Pictures go beyond the logic. You know, words and text and all of that are logical. Pictures are emotional. So it speaks to the emotion deep down inside, that subconscious that we're not even aware of. You know, and that's why if you look at, yes, I'm going to say it, comedic spiritual science, those pictures are so intricate in their simplicity. They look real simple, but if you know what the symbols are and why they chose that specifically, you start to see they're saying a bunch. The Washington Monument is saying a whole lot. You know, essentially what they call an obelisk, or what we call a check-in, is a penis. It's the resurrection, it's the birth. And so in Washington, D.C., you have this big Washington Monument. There's a big white dick that's letting you and the world know that we are giving birth, that this is the rebirth of European culture, and not being able to interpret those things. And that's an obvious symbol, but apply that same idea to everybody's wearing penitentiary clothing. What is it fucking telling you? And I think that the most fundamental definition, and maybe I'll get y'all opinion on it. For me, the most fundamental definition of word, the word, W-O-R-D, the most fundamental definition is intent plus sound. So you essentially, what I'm saying is you taking this intent, this purpose, this reason for being, and giving it sound. You're giving it a life through that vibration. So you're setting your purpose and your intention on these vibrations. And so whatever the agreement that this intention is behind a particular word, that's the intention. That's the understanding. And then to give it life, to give it frequency, to give it resonance, instead of dissonance, give it resonance in the world, you give it sound, you set it on a frequency. And that's how symbols work. The symbol of a cross or the star and the crescent is an idea that is now visually being given, light resonance. It's resonance on light waves because we can see it. But it's the same idea. Your intention, whatever it is you're putting out. When I go into work and folks, walk by you and they say, good morning, how you doing? Shit like that. I know, and I get confused. I get twisted up because I be wanting to be honest or, genuine with people. But when you go in and somebody says, how you doing? Try telling them how you actually doing. Make up some shit. Oh, I got bursitis, my back hurt, my baby mama did this, my dog ran up, See how long they hang around. They don't really want to engage with you about it. It's just something that people say. It's just what you say. And
it's
so,
like Talib Kweli said, I can't remember which album it was, but he said, you're not polite, you're well trained.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're well trained to respond to these things. For me, the interaction became, and I do it especially when I'm interacting, like buying something at the store, especially in these little, Asian stores in our neighborhood. Once I paid them and they say, have a good day, I don't know what their intent is. I hear the words, have a good day. But in their mind, they could be thinking, fuck you, die in a car wreck, blah, 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 blah. They could have all kinds of negative intentions set to that vibration. So for me to push it back, I give it right back, you too. I don't want your intention. So take those words, loaded with that intention that you have, take that picture, that music, whatever it is, with the intention that you have set to it, take that shit back. I don't want it. But we have succumbed, again, this is my ever evolving idea, or what I'm calling it, that we've accepted white folks' definition of death. And so we accept, when you do that, you buy into the superficial. Because if we believe, as they believe, that YOLO, this is the life you get, this is the one and only, this is it, we buy into that, then the only thing we have to hold on to is that superficial. There is nothing more deeper to it than that. It's what you see is what you get, that's it, there's nothing else. And we bought into that. And because we bought into that, we separated ourselves from the purpose, intent, and all of those things that come along with culture and language and all of that. And we bought into what they control. We control the intention and the purpose. They control the expression. You know, you can't get a decent record deal with white folk without white folks' approval. You can't blow up on a national or international stage without white folks' approval. And so we buy into that godliness and that superficial existence, and it's their world to control and to manipulate. Whereas the intention and the purpose is something that we control, and we've turned that off, we've cut that off. We've bought into somebody else's cultural definitions and their symbols, and we bought into that, and that's where our reality lives, is on the surface level. And we're not going to really be able to affect anything on any meaningful level until we stop buying into that superficial, that topical level. So I know, Psych, you said you had some stuff that you had.
You did a war rendition and took off for about a good 30 minutes straight. So actually, I should have wrote notes because there was a lot of things you said that I really wanted to touch on, but I didn't want to interrupt you. But I'm gonna try to get it in this. You said, and you're right, 100% correct. This is why I love symbols, and this is why I love the origin of words, because everything is a symbol. The human being consistently comprehends reality through symbols. A lot of times we don't understand that. We think we understand, we comprehend it through words, but a word is even a symbol. A word is just a symbol. When you see the word CAT on a piece of paper, you automatically think cat and everything that comes along with what a cat is. But if you think about it, those scribbles, those curves and lines on the paper does not even look like a cat. It's not a cat, but it's a word. It's a symbol that we prescribe the concept of what a cat is too. It's a symbol.
Sound like Alan Watts.
Or even when we look at you remember a lot of times back in the day, people were walking around, especially those people in New York, they had an I, a quote unquote heart, and then an NY. We instantly knew that meant I love New York. We instantly knew that. Even though that heart symbol, which is a symbol itself, doesn't look anything like a real heart. But all these things are just simply symbols. So we comprehend reality through symbols, metaphors, allegories, and symbolisms. That's how we comprehend reality. Now here's something deeper. The brother Supreme Understanding argued a powerful point that the human being is a superorganism in his book Science of Self. And if you think about the human being, and culture is that thing that actually ties us all together, as you was showing in that diagram you had. Culture is the thing that does that. We are a superorganism. Now let me go back and show. We essentially, culture is a way of life, and we essentially comprehend our reality in a similar way. People that come from the same culture comprehend the language, comprehend the metaphors in our reality. We comprehend all of these things in a similar way, which is what connects us and makes us that superorganism because of culture. When you separate the people from their culture, then you break the ability of that people to be a superorganism. They can no longer speak to each other without words anymore. They can no longer, and as you said about men and women, they can no longer even comprehend the words that they're using with each other because the culture has been eliminated or destroyed or broken. So those people can no longer operate as a superorganism or operate in their own best behalf or their own benefit. And as we know, that was something that was done intentionally, because you cannot have a group of people operating together like that and still dominate and take over those people. We see it all the time with things like the George Floyd incident or the Trayvon Martin incident, things like this. And where I'm going with this is you see these young brothers getting beat, killed, murdered by the police, and you personally feel it. You personally feel it because you have, for a reason, you have a connection to them. The superorganism I talked about, you have a cultural connection because you see them and you see the same skin that you have and you say, oh, that's my people. Not because you new Trayvon Martin, a new George Floyd, but because you comprehend that that could be you. That the reason that this is done is because of the color of the skin and the culture that these people are connected to. You know that that could be you. That could have been you. That could have been your son. That could have been your brother. That could have been someone close to you just because they descend from that particular culture. And and all people have culture. All groups of people have culture that connects them to their people like a superorganism, except for the people that have had their culture raped, vulturized. I don't know if that's a proper word, and then refed back to them in a distorted way. And it leads back to the argument that Ward was given. I'm not trying to get in y'all debate, that Ward was given a few weeks ago when he said that we was assimilated, because that's what happens when the people break your, just like the Borg on Star Trek. When the people break your culture, they destroy your culture. They destroy the superorganism hive mindset that the people are supposed to have so they can move together in their own benefit. They destroy it. And then they re-give you their culture. Therefore, you become assimilated into that Borg. You become a part of them, as you always argue, that we're operating off their economic system. We're operating off their beliefs, their ideals. We're communicating with their language, and therefore we don't even comprehend ourselves. We don't even see and understand how we are supposed to move together. So we don't understand the power of symbols anymore. And that's one of the most powerful things. I think it was Louis Farrakhan that said, I believe it was, he said that there's three things that was taken from us when we was taken as slaves. The science of economics, the science of symbolism, and the science of warfare. And when you take those three things from a people, you remove their ability to truly be an independent, sovereign people. And that power of comprehending symbols is so powerful. And I'm gonna say this. And then I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna say this. And I'm gonna use the Bible again. I'm gonna go into the Bible real quick. And I'm gonna tie this back to us culturally. Because we know and we comprehend, any of us that have done true studies know that many of the teachings and knowledge that's in the Bible came out of Kemet. And I'm not fit to do one of those Black Hebrew Israelites arguments for that we all Black people on the planet are the people that descend from Israel. I don't care anything about any of that nonsense. But I don't care anything about any of that. I'm not a super religious. You know,
too tired for that shit.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do all that. But what I will do is show and I'm not gonna try to get into a long diatribe of doing this, but I will show, and we all know that knowledge that ended up being claimed by those original people that was in Israel did come from Kemet. Even the word Moses, who was considered their lawgiver, that name, that was not a name, that was a title. And it was a title that was given to a graduate of the ancient quote unquote mystery schools in Kemet. Moses meant one who was drawn from the water. That's what the word literally means. And the word is a title, just like in today's society, if you graduate with a master, you have a master's degree or a doctorate degree. You had a Moses, you were called a Moses. Moses meant to be drawn from the water. The symbolism of the water is that water was wisdom, because the two places on the planet that was considered to be the beginning of civilization was along rivers, the Nile Valley civilization and along the Indus Valley civilization, which was along rivers. And those rivers is what saturated the soil, which allowed agriculture to be invented, which allowed people to stop migrating, which allowed them to build cities and institutions, and voila, what human beings end up calling civilization. So we always saw the power of water as being that very thing that gave life. So when we say one was drawn from the water, we were saying one was drawn from the wisdom. Even when we see the people of Israel, when they say that they left Egypt, when we see it in the Bible, it said they left Egypt with silver and gold from Egypt in order to start their new society. The silver and gold is a symbol. The gold represents the sun, the knowledge. The silver represents the moon, the wisdom. So it's saying that they left Egypt with Egypt's knowledge and Egypt's wisdom in order to foundate a completely new society, a completely new reality. You know what I'm saying? So you see this knowledge there, but the symbol I wanted to break down was this one. And I'm not going to go into deep detail of it, but I'm going to just touch it real quick. And I think it's Revelation chapter 12 in the Bible. And you know, Revelation, one of those books that the preacher man rarely goes into because it's extremely symbolic, extremely metaphorical. And in this chapter, it talks about a virgin, a woman. It says that, it says that she was clothed in the sun and that she stood on the moon. She was standing on the moon. And it said that she had a garland, a crown, basically a crown of stars on her head. And it says she was pregnant with child about to give birth. And it says a dragon came and the dragon stood in front of her so that when she gave birth, he could kill her son. But then she fled the dragon. And I'm not going to go into all the details of what it is, of all of that, but of the whole story. But I just want to show this symbolism. That woman, that virgin, was the mystery schools, those teachings, that knowledge. What was going on in that time was that Europeans had started their ideal of imperialism and colonialism all over the planet, or at least as much of the planet that they knew existed at the time. And one of the first places that they came into, because they were one of the grandest centers on the planet, was Africa. And one of the greatest empires of that time that was doing this imperialism was Rome. When you talk about this dragon, the dragon is not a real dragon. It's not a monster that flew out the sky. It was the Roman Empire. It said that this dragon, I can't remember, it said it had, yeah, I do. It said it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The heads, just like in America. America is the dragon. Let's say America is the dragon. So you have the emperor, who is the president, and then you have the various kings who are the governors of each state. That's why it had 7 heads. That's why the dragon had 7 heads. And then it had 10 horns, which are, and what does a horn do for a dragon or any kind of animal? It's its defense. So it's saying that it had 10 armies. So it's talking about an empire that had 7 leaders, kings, under an emperor, and then 10 military factions. That's what the horns represented. And they were trying to destroy the woman. Now, who is the woman? The woman symbolically is Isis, a Set. That's who it is. And a Set represents the virgin, who is the mystery schools, who is those ancient teachings. One of the first things that Rome was doing was trying to destroy our knowledge. And those ancient wise master builders knew this. So what they did is they hid their knowledge in symbol for a reason. It had 2 reasons. One, to preserve it, because if you don't know what you're looking for, then you won't destroy it. The second thing was so that the knowledge can be revealed only to those who was worthy, those who was actually willing to do the work in order to allow their mind to be raised to a high level of consciousness. How do we know this? Listen to what it says about the woman. It says she's clothed in the sun. Have you ever in your life seen a woman clothed in the sun? Ever? No. The sun is a metaphor for knowledge. It means that the school is clothed in knowledge. She stood on the moon. Nobody has ever in their life stood on the moon. The moon represents wisdom. So it said that her foundation was the moon. It says she had a garland of stars on her head. The garland of stars, the stars only represent understanding. That's what it represents. So when it describes this woman, it's only talking about a way of life, a teaching that gave birth to students, to teach, to master builders. If the Panther Party was the woman, then those revolutionaries that came out of the Panther Party, once they got the political education, is that child that the woman was about to give birth to. And that dragon wanted to kill those children because those children are the ones who would bring liberation to the rest of the people on the planet. That's the metaphor that's being told in Revelation 12, because the Roman Empire was trying to destroy this teaching. That teaching came out of Kemet, and it found its way into Qumran, centers of Qumran. It found its way even all the way to Arabia, amongst the Sufis and the beginning of Islam, because even Muhammad came out of Arabia and found some of those ancient teachers who was hiding in the caves. It said that he met with the angel Gabriel, that he was hiding behind a spider's web and this, that, there, and other. But we all know, when you do this bit, and I know the super religious freaks will attack me for all of this, we all know there wasn't nothing but those ancient master teachers who had to flee Kemet and was hiding in those caves, that was able to build with Muhammad, and Muhammad was able to take that knowledge back to his people. It was those ancient master builders who was able to settle the lands of Israel, who was able to settle the lands of Ethiopia, and then finally had to even flee all the way into Asia and take this knowledge, what they call the Gnostics. This is who these people were. And they hid their teachings in symbols. They hid it in metaphors. As I said, one, to hide it from the enemy who were trying to destroy it, but another beautiful reason. Because as you said, E, when you talked about the quote unquote, the metanetter, the quote unquote hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet, they was simplistically complex. And human beings understand and comprehend more through images. We comprehend more. All of us learned the alphabet, the English alphabet. We didn't learn it through a painstaking logical process of rational thinking. We learned it through a damn song. They sung it to us. And by singing it to us, it stuck. Then the ideas of what those letters meant, the symbols of the symbolic sounds that those letters meant was taught to the song, and it made sense. When you hear the story of the rabbit and the turtle, which actually came out of Africa, but when you hear the story of the rabbit and the turtle, you hear the story and you can remember the story. Then the lesson of what the story meant can be applied to the story once you've memorized it and understood it because you like the story. But the lesson is applied. Jesus walking on water didn't mean some dude 2,000 years ago actually walked on water. You learned the story because it was easier to learn the story than the knowledge behind the story can be applied to the comprehension. And that's the power of symbols. That's the purpose of it. We think and comprehend reality through symbols. And culture is the vehicle that transport those symbols to a group of people to make that people a superorganism, like a group of bees or a group of ants, as a supreme understanding debated in the book Science, The Science of Self. It's way over there on my shelf, so I ain't gonna get it to show it to y'all. But another good book, and it's closer to me, and it's written by a European, but it's a good book. It's called Secret Teachers of All Ages by 33rd Degree Mason, N.B.P.P Hall. This is a beautiful book for understanding a lot of symbols, especially those symbols that have been used in Masonry and in the Bible and in Islam. He got whole chapters building on those concepts, on what those things represented and meant. But that's all I wanted to say, and I'm gonna pass the mic.
Let me get some mic time, just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Yeah, I want to go Warreadian dictionaries out. Here we go.
Right. But basically, what I want to do is want to give y'all what's going on when we lose the essence of what symbols is. So basically, when symbols are lost in appeal, then that appeal becomes the symbol, and that's what we're talking about. And you have an example at that point of what's called replacement reduction warfare. Let me say that again. When the symbol is lost in appeal and that appeal becomes the symbol, that is a method called replacement reduction warfare. This is reproduction of influencing with an emphasis on replicating relationships of reduction in order to detach the essence of a definition. Kind of going back to what E was saying earlier about the circle, that's also goes into the difference between circles as opposed to spirals. From that standpoint, the best example I can think of is that's when a person is caught on a hamster wheel and they're going around and around and around, where in essence what we're supposed to be doing with our knowledge, which graduates into wisdom, is spiral. It's always working its way out, which is like a circle, but on a higher angle. And so from that standpoint, it's not enclosed, but it continues to spiral. So it has direction, which actually goes to one of the things y'all stated earlier about the word, which you can look at as being wind, octave, resonance, and direction. That's what word is: wind, octave, resonance, and direction, which equals sound. And so I wanted to put that out there. Another thing real quick on, like when Syke was talking about the heart symbol, let me give y'all some symbol understanding or understanding behind that. The reason why that symbol was chosen really didn't have anything to do with the physical heart, but had to do with the fact that what you're looking at is a petal. A good example of a petal from that standpoint would be like a clover. If you take a clover is that shape. What that shape represents is also called the y'all, I mess up words. Fibonacci sequence, the Fibonacci sequence, which goes into 1 + 2 = 3, 2 + 3 = 5, and so on. And the Fibonacci sequence basically talks about the harmonics of life. And through that symbol that has been called the heart, going into that sequence and going into those harmonics, and which is a frequency, that also ended up basically representing the heartbeat, because the heartbeat has a specific resonance. And so from that standpoint, you look at flesh, and you look at the animal kingdom, in that pedal ended up basically becoming a equal to a heart when you talk about the animal kingdom, so to speak. So it was a relationship between the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom, and that's how you get that heart. So just so y'all know, that's where that came from.
Well,
We talking about the symbol of the heart.
Yeah.
But I think the idea here, I mean, those are all on point and very good examples and drill downs into the uses of symbolism and whatnot. But I don't want, we have a habit, because we've been told that these are symbols. These are not symbols. This is just stuff that goes on. And so that detachment, that misunderstanding, that like said, everything is a symbol. Everything is something being reflected back at you. And so, in African culture and most any other culture, in non-white culture, we understood that, broken mind can't heal itself. And that was a part of the need and the codependent, the interdependence between individuals, between people, was that war reflects back shit that I need to see about me. We reflect back shit to Psych that Psych needs to see, because Psych can't see this negative thing or quote unquote negative thing about himself, because it clouds itself in himself. I mean, you know what I mean? Yeah. That's the purpose of the ego, to keep us from being in pain. So it clouds that shit and won't let us see that shit and understand. So we have others that we bounce it off of. We had that culture where war is a symbol of some of the shit I don't like about myself. Psych is a symbol reflecting back some of the shit I don't like about myself. With that detachment during so-called slave times, and with it being on a hyper level now, where everything is digital and Facebook and all of this shit, where our actual interactions with humanity have been minimized, we're no longer able to psychoanalyze ourselves through those reflections. We can't understand ourselves anymore and our own realities and what we're doing, because we don't have anything to bounce it off of, because nothing is taken as symbol. All of us are symbols to one another. All of us are reflections to one another, of one another. And that's a part of what developed the civilizations and our societies and cultures, is that we understood that we needed each other in order to understand self. But we don't have that anymore, because we've been given a culture that minimizes symbolism, that minimizes the human interaction, minimize all of those things that are counter to our reality, and we've taken those things on and accepted. And so we have to drill back to understanding that everything you come across in life is to show you something about yourself. You subconsciously set yourself up in situations so that you can see shit about yourself. I don't like that. I need to change that. Or that's great. I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna amplify that. I'm gonna bump it up. We do that shit subconsciously so that we can have some type of symbolism to tell us who we are, what we're doing, what we need to do better, or what we're doing fine, or whatever it is. But because we've been cut off from that simple just definition, that simple reality, where we no longer look at the moon, but we're stuck looking at the finger pointing at the moon, makes us extremely, extremely vulnerable, very easily manipulated by a system. Because as long as we're looking at that finger, we're going to believe that it is the end all and be all, and go and do whatever it tells us to do, rather than seeing what it is it's trying to guide us to. So we have this disconnect just from simple shit within the society of symbolism and the science of symbolism. And ancient societies, whether children knew it in those terms or not, children came up understanding symbols, came up understanding life as a symbol, as a reflection of what it is we needed to do or not do. And so having that been taken away, self-development Even the idea of self-development in the system, in the society, is a joke, because it doesn't, it's superficial. It says some words that, what was that? The law of attraction, and what was that book? What was that book? The Secret, shit like that. I hate shit like that, because it boils down the whole, like the law of attraction. It boils all that shit down to a few pages in a book, which they're big words, widely spaced. So it's not even a, you know, a real dense book. It's this, you know, cheap ass book that gives you the superficial, but doesn't talk about what is actually going on. Doesn't talk about, by the way, if you're going to do this law of attraction shit, it's going to take your entire life for you to really get it right, because nobody wants to do that shit.
It's ironic. I was having a discussion with a brother, and pretty sharp brother, but his first book on that level that he read was The Secret. And mine was The Kabbalion by the Three Initiates. So I was trying to share him the Kabbalion, and he was constantly saying, well, this is too much. It's giving me all these unnecessary details. The Secret is just telling me to do this. And I told him, okay, The Secret is telling you the icing. This is telling you the science behind how that works. And he just didn't want to process that.
Yeah.
It's like the Christian concept. All I got to do is accept the Lord Savior Jesus Christ as my Savior, and that's it.
Exactly.
There's a science behind what that means.
And again, science just means know.
To know, yeah.
There's
matter of fact, to break it down even deeper, you know, I love etymology. The Latin word seer, S-C-I-R-E, literally means to cut. So the word means to dissect. So to know by breaking down. Yeah, exactly. To know by breaking down, to cut, to break it apart, to completely dismantle it, and then bring it back together. So we take it apart, we analyze it, and then we synthesize it in the self. But people don't want the process. They just want the end result.
But I think that a major part of that attraction is just the lifestyle. I mean, let's face it, capitalism is a symbol of the Europeans' most fundamental coming out of the caves approach to addressing the economy. You know, dog eat dog. That's you can't get no more basic than that. You don't grow shit, you just eat another dog. Yeah. Not you eat a rabbit, you eat another fucking dog. And that's essentially, you know, the thrust of capitalism. And with us being on the bottom end of it, we're having to eat dogs almost damn near quite literally in order to survive. So all of that thought process and shit, that's some extra shit that people who have the time and energy, like, oh, I don't know, a slave master like Jefferson and them, can sit back and write the fucking Constitution and shit, which they ain't even really write it. They just borrowed a bunch of our shit and applied and copied and pasted that shit on some paper and said, here you go. They took the law of attraction and just ran with that shit. They didn't look at the work involved underneath it, because you can't be talking about all men are created equal and you owning motherfuckers over here. That's some bullshit. But we have embraced that surface existence, and it's okay. Just like in the church, you can, as long as you say the words, Lord Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, da 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 da. What you did don't matter. You could be giving up every check to charity, going out every day to feed people, doing all the humanitarian shit anybody could ever possible do with every breath that they take. But if you don't say those words, it's meaningless. So it's that superficial, those words you put out, that's the meaning for us. We take that, all of that underlying work and shit, all those are the details. I don't want to hear about that. No, wait a minute. That's backwards. That's ass backwards. You know, so yeah, that idea of symbolism and the detachment and all of that is, to me, because we've accepted their culture and our place in that culture, which is in the bottom rung. And so you don't find value in putting effort and energy into working out those details. My bad, boy.
I don't know how to get at, and to me, what we're going in circles with is the fact that we have to get our people to recognize that we are at war. And that's why I gave y'all the type of warfare that we're talking about. Again, that's the replacement reduction warfare method, which is taking the concept and the science of symbols and replacing it with a appeal. Therefore, it basically goes into an emotional state. And when you replace a symbol with an emotional state, and then you give it the the character of appetite, all of a sudden now it is not about language anymore, which is what, like you said earlier, it's not about language, which again goes back into the concept of word, when, octave, resonance, direction. It's not about that anymore. So the point is, our people need to know that they're dealing with a type of strategic warfare that's designed to actually remove the essence of definition. That's why I said you're talking about reduction in order to detach the essence of definition, which is why symbol is no longer a symbol, going into why you, like you said, a pattern, which is why as Panthers we teach, within what we call our local objectives. The first thing we deal with local objectives, we start off with what we call the 3Ds: define, develop, and defend. So from that standpoint, we have to redefine and give ourselves definition again. And then we need to be able to develop that definition that we define ourselves, and then defend that, which basically means we have to establish a foundation in terms of operation. So all we're basically talking about is recognizing that it is a strategy in order to dumb down the population. And even going back to what you was talking about the quote unquote founding fathers of the Constitution. Again, we're talking about people that were Masons, that were part of a secret society that erected a code and a structure of keeping symbols secret from the masses, which again, like you said, they stole that from us. They stole that from Black people, but they hid the language in symbols, and they hid symbols in architect. And then that architect was taught to the masses as being something pretty. And by it being something pretty, it appeals to their lower nature, not their higher nature. And therefore, it will not have an attachment through a language code, which will automatically be able to allow you to relate to the essence or the symbology as a language and a way of life. And therefore, you'll know how to walk throughout life. That's why I even went back to the concept what Syke said earlier about the symbol of the heart. Again, that was the connection between the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, but people don't know that. That's why I referenced the Fibonacci sequence. I can't mess that word up. But
translation Fibonacci.
Yeah.
Fibonacci sequence. So from that standpoint, what that sequence is showing you that relationship, and that sequence is hidden in a whole lot of architecture, a whole lot of paintings, a whole lot of drawings, even music gets into it with the what they call the binormal rhythms and sub rhythms, which work off the alpha and beta waves. So all of this stuff is hidden in plain sight, basically, simply because most people don't know that they're dealing with a strategy of warfare called replacement reduction that is basically meant to detach a definition or the concept of definition from what you're looking at. And so therefore, everything that you're dealing with, you're looking at it and tasting or taking it in for the sake of ingesting through appealing. This is why, when you referenced earlier, movies like Alice in Wonderland, to most people, they look at it and they have no idea that this is all about the connection between the higher realm and the higher level of understanding, which is why the mushrooms are all over the place. Same thing with the Smurfs. Most kids are watching Smurfs, not recognizing that they're watching little blue men who live in magic mushrooms. And you're also dealing with the symbology of the 12, going back to the Bible that Brother Syke was talking about, which is really just a coded way of talking about constellations. And then you have the one woman that's amongst the Smurfs, because in dealing with the constellations, you're talking about the Pisces, which at that point in time was a phenomenon aspect within the constellation. All this stuff is all connected, but unless you are able to know and be able to see through symbology, because it's a part of you and you know the language, then it's just something cute to look at, something cute to taste, something cute to watch, or something cute to listen to. So we have to get our people to know that they are being basically controlled through a means of warfare to reduce our connection with the world around us. And when we are disconnected from the world around us, then when a person goes out in nature, they're not able to see themselves in nature. So therefore, I can't see God because I don't see my own reflection. And if I don't know how to identify my own reflection, then I have to look to somebody else as a God. So therefore, now you're talking about the inferiority complex. Now you're talking about how they go in and they give you these images, you know, of their cousins and kinfolks and uncles, and they call that a Jesus, and then people buy into it. And from that standpoint, they have reduced themselves, again, replacement reduction warfare, to a point of reaching to somebody else for their own essence and understanding. And then it goes into why they say lean not on your own understanding in the Bible, because what is meant? What is meant is for you not to be able to connect the dots. What is meant for you not to be able to see self. Going back to what Syke was talking about in that book, Science of Self. So the people got to know that this is what you're dealing with.
And I think that the most profound or the most effective means, at least in most of my adult life, has been the music. Because to translate all of that Warridian, when I was in high school in '88 and all of that, you had rap cats like KRS-One, you know, Rakim, cats that were respected on the microphone because they took the word and actually said something. They made it sound fly, but they were saying something. There was a meaning, there was an intent, a purpose behind it. You had Two Live Crew over there as well, which is fine. That was just about the sound. It sounds good. I like to hear it. It doesn't mean anything, you know, nothing, you know, purposeful, intentional, nothing uplifting, anything of those sorts, but it sounded good. And that was fine, because you had both sides of that coin, so to speak, going on at the same time. Or if you fast forward to today, all you've got in rap music, by and large, not that there aren't those who are more or less outliers, cats like Talib and Mos Def and others that are doing the same type of work that someone like KRS-One was doing, making something with substance sound fly, which for me is art, versus those who are making a nice sound. And that's what I hear when War is talking about that, is that appeal versus what was the other thing? The appeal versus the science. Where it used to be a science to rap, it used to be a science to this shit. Now it just has to sound good. It just has to hit right. It just has to have the right bass line come in. It doesn't have to carry any intent or purpose. It just has to sound good, and we're gonna roll with it. And so we do, and we roll with it. And if we look around at our societies have followed that downward trajectory where there used to be some thoughtfulness going into our interaction day to day with one another in our societies and what we did, to today, when there is no substance in our interaction. Our interaction exists just for the sake of interacting. The symbols that we buy into are empty symbols. That warfare, that sound, that appeal. We're a people of appeal now. We're emotional beings now. We have been reduced to that, to where we are not thinking, because the symbols that we cling to are telling us not to think, to just do, turning us into automatons, turning us into a robot, and turning us to brain dead zombies that simply walk through the process of the day without any real thought to what's going on.
That would be the difference from the musical aspect when you talk about that. The difference between a rapper and an MC. And so that, you know, again, is something that has been lost, and that loss goes into basically capitalism. The whole point now at this point is it's about making money, which
yeah. Which I mean, that's a part of the warfare. That's just funding the war machine. You know, how do you get the money? You appeal to the lowest common denominator, make everybody bounce and sway. They're gonna give you the money so that you can turn around and fine tune the shit and make it so that they're not just moving to the same beat, but their fucking shoelaces are bouncing to the same beat.
And it incentivizes more of those to come out doing music that has no message. It incentivizes because even Jay said, you know, he one of my favorite rappers, but he said this, and it's something to think about. He said it. I can't remember the exact quote, but it was, truth be told, if lyrics sold lyrically, I'd be Talib Kweli. But I went 5 times platinum. He say, some when your dollars make that much sense, I ain't been rhyming common sense. You know, it's a mind state that, oh hell, I'm gonna sell out to the money. That makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So I ain't gonna rhyme like common sense. I ain't been rhyming common sense. I'm not gonna spit that common sense in my music because that doesn't make money.
Exactly.
You know, and that's what we are sold on. And like you say, that funds the war machine. This is all defined. If you think about it, I was listening to a Charleston White interview not too long ago. He was on the Fresh and Fit podcast, deep interview, powerful interview, and I felt it. It resonated with me, but I didn't know that the 2 Live Crew was teaching us to rape women. I didn't know this. I never paid attention to it. The 2 Live Crew was teaching us to rape women. And he was explaining how the songs, because we used to listen to these songs, we loved them, and we imitated it. And we thought it was cool. And we was running trains on women. And the 2 Live Crew was telling us how to do it. They said in that song, they said, I can't remember how the song go, I ain't heard it in years. But they basically say, you basically get her in the room. You know, she like you, she like E. Let's say she like E. E got her to come over, get in the room. E got in there, E stroking her, he doing his thing. And he tell us, you know, when you hear us get started, y'all just come on in. And so me, War, and the whole group of dudes walk in with our penises out. You know what I'm saying? And she, like they say on the song, I would stick my dick in and it would get stuck. The girl would say, stop. I say, I'm not. That's enough. I quit because you busted me out. This is rape. You know what I'm saying? And and there are many, I don't know the statute of limitations on this stuff, so I don't want to claim that, but we didn't know what we were doing. So we would do this because we heard it on the song. We thought it was cool. So we would get in there, and it gets to the point that most young ladies at that point, they end up with Eve. They end up with the dude they like. But now it's 8 dudes that walks in the room. If I say no and start fighting, I could get hurt. It's easier just to lay here and take it. And then these dudes take their turn on this girl, and then you don't even know what you do to a young woman's mind at this age. You know what I'm saying? This is actually disgusting when you think about it. You know what I'm saying? And it's shameful. I'm ashamed of it. But this is what's being perpetrated and sent out over the airways to the community. You know, we talked about the symbols, the power of words, the power of our music, the power of the rhythmic beat. We talk about this. You can guarantee the record executives understand this. They understand this power. And that's why I brought up what the brother said in this book, The Science of Self, what the brother said in this, the man, God, and the mathematical language of nature. What he talk about in this book, when he talk about the superhuman beings being a superorganism like bees, he break down bees and how they communicate and how they move together. And we communicate in a similar way, but we communicate through culture. And our culture is communicates through those symbols. We understand those symbols. The best way to destroy a group of people's ability to be a superorganism, to move together in a common mind state, is to destroy the culture. Now they can no longer communicate through the symbols. Then you replace it with a distorted, mutated culture, and then they start operating as mutants. I used to love to watch Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Not all the Star Trek, but the Deep Space Nine was a good one to me. Because if you pay attention, especially if you're a student of human history, you'll notice that the different quote unquote alien races are nothing more than the different groups of human beings on the planet. They just turned them into aliens. There's a group, you know the Borg, all y'all know the Borg. That's Europeans. But there's another group, I can't remember the name of this group, and I see Africans in that. It's us. And in the story, the first one you see on the space station, he's only one. He thinks he's the only one left. He don't think it's any more of him. And he can take the form of he can take a humanoid form, but in his most basic form, he's liquid. So when he's back in his room, you know, he turns into this liquid in this pool, and he just chills. But when he finally realized that his people still exist, the entire planet is liquid. And the first time he's able to liquidize and unite with his people, it's like, it's mind blowing. It's like heaven. It's mind blowing. You know what I'm saying? And it's something that he loves. You know what I'm talking about? And these people, and the reason I contrast these two, the Borg and I can't remember the name of this group, this race of people on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but they're common, but they're so far from each other. The Borg is a group that's connected, look alike, move, have the same mind state, but it's based off of dominating other groups of people and then forcing them to assimilate. That other race of people can't even make other people assimilated to who they are. You have to actually be born this in order to be able to connect. They call it what do they call it when they connect with each other? I can't remember the name of it, but it was, if you ever watch Star Trek Deep Space Nine and see this group, you'll be like, oh man, that's African people, because they can even communicate with each other without talking. You know what I'm saying?
So who are the Klingons? Since you talk about Africa,
and that's us too. But that's Europeans that started understanding of who we are. But that's us too. You know what I'm saying? But if you look at Star Trek, they and I see us and them too from the warrior perspective. And I forget the name, but the main one, he the one that operate off honor. You know what I'm saying? He got this warrior's pride and this honor and these concepts of honor. I can't remember his name, but he grew up around them. He grew up around Europeans. He grew up, but he still have the ways of his people. That's us too. And as you know, that there were different groups and tribes of people in Africa. So it's taken different aspects of who we were as a people. Yeah, the Klingons is us too, but as Europeans, it's one way that a group of people look at themselves from the inside out, and it's another way that somebody else look at a group of people from the outside in. And the Klingons are a representation of how Europeans saw us from the outside looking in. That's why they all black hair.
The Odo.
The who?
Odo.
The race of people I'm talking about. The liquid people. I don't think it's the Odo. I can't remember. Let me look it up. Google tell you everything. You know what's so crazy? I remember I was talking to somebody not too long ago. I can't remember who it was, but I was explaining. I can't remember what it was we were talking about, but I was explaining the breakdown of something that probably took me 10 years of study to learn. And I was explaining, and then they checked it on Google and said, oh yeah, you're right. I said, how you know? Oh, I Googled it. Googled and took away I didn't have to study 10 years to learn this information, and you Googled it. Ain't that some shit?
And that's one of the issues, you know, if you have all the answers right there in your pocket, who needs to study? You know, I just look it up real quick. But that's a part of that, you know, we get the verbal breakdown of it, but the work that goes into actually learning it, you know, and that's one of the benefits for me that the party gave to me, was that these ideas and whatnot, I could have read in a book, set it on the shelf, but having invested time and energy in what was going on, I actually learned, understood, understand a lot of these concepts and ideas because of the application, because of what we had to go through, what we chose to go through, what we sacrificed, and all of those things. But yeah, I mean, it all comes back to, you know, that same trick, and they do it in the military. You take away your civilian culture and replace it with the military culture. It's the same idea. You can't, you know, you shave your head, you give up your worldly possessions, you know, you put somewhere with somebody that you don't know, and then you're broken down physically for going through a 50-mile hike or whatever, and then these ideas and whatnot are fed into your head. The same shit in war. You should take me out of the woods, beat the hell out of me, and then start talking.
It's the Odo. How the hell you know that?
Because I'm good. Talking that shit while I'm sitting there out of breath and wasted and can't, you know, leave me alone. He's talking that, and that's the same thing that they do. They've broken us down physically, so we got to work 12 jobs to try to pay the rent. Meanwhile, we're looking at the TV for our relaxation or whatever, recreation, not even recreation, but our, you know, escape. And it's feeding us the bullshit, because we're broken down mentally, emotionally, physically. We can't fight back. And so we absorb that shit and soak that shit up. And that's just another step in the process that we've been going through all of these years. But yeah, we don't attach any significance to it.
That's what I meant when I was talking about the whole aspect of changing the appetite. So they've changed our appetite, and by changing our appetite, then what we find appealing is all the stuff that neutralizes our connection with the real world and the connection with the reality that of knowledge of self. So our appetite has changed. Our appetite now has went from live, what we call live food, which is the world, to processed food. And processed food at that point goes right into what I was talking about with Google. That's being able to get an instantaneous results, an instant and so that's what, you know, that's what I call microwave knowledge. So microwave knowledge doesn't require you to do anything but press a few buttons and it comes out hot and ready. Since it comes out hot and ready, you now don't have any type of need to actually grow, learn, and understand anything. It's just instantaneous, and that instantaneous makes you lose your connection with the world and with life.
Well, we getting close to 8, so this is what I'm gonna have y'all to do. Both of y'all. E, give us a summarize the purpose of this bill and why we decided to do a show on the scientific art of symbols. And War, give a quick summary of why this is warfare and why it's important to understand.
So it's the idea is to get us to begin to look at the world around us as a reflection of who it is we are and where we are. To understand that everything we come in contact, everything we do, everything we take in, and everything we put out is a result of the culture that's being bounced around us. That everything exists within our reality, both as a product of ourselves, as well as a reflection of everything else that's going on around us. And it's that interaction that we have to begin to examine and to look at and not take so lightly and brush things aside and brush things off, to get beyond this idea that symbols are this particular group of things over here that we've been told these are symbols, and realize that that idea of symbolism applies to anything and everything that we come across. And by doing so, to empower our interpretation of the world around us, to begin to see where we are in reality, as opposed to where it is we think we are, where it is we want to feel like, where it is that makes us feel good for saying we are. Like saying I'm a king or I'm a queen. No, the fuck you're not. And dealing with the reality. You might be a good man or a good woman, but you're not a king or a queen. These words are symbols that are shaping our reality, whether we're aware of it or not. If you choose to be oblivious, fine, whatever. But understand that the ability to interpret and to recognize is right there in front of us. All we have to do is be open to it and accept some fundamental realities. Not saying just accept what we tell you, that ain't what we're saying, but to give it some thought, to give it, you suspend what it is you think or feel about the subject for just the length of the show. Pretend you don't have any ideas on it. Don't argue anything, just sit there and be like, what's being said is the absolute truth. Soak it up for a second, think about it. Is it real? Is it not real? Is that bullshit? Because your ideas will still be there when you come back. When video's over and you wake up tomorrow, whatever, you can believe whatever you want. You can tap your heels together, 3 times, and no place like home, and you back in Kansas and took the blue pill, you forgot about all of this shit. Try to plug back in if you want, that's fine. But at least for that time period, entertain the possibility that everything that you come in contact with is trying to tell you something about the world around you. And it becomes an extremely powerful thing. When people around you aren't aware that you're able to do this, you start to take on godlike attributes in their eyes, because you're sitting back and you're interpreting things that are going on. You can read people, you can read situations. You understand yourself, you can understand other people, and to better place yourself in a position to move forward on whatever your path is. So that idea of seeing the world as one big symbol, one constantly changing, revealing itself symbol, day in and day out. For sugar in your coffee, but no cream, it's a symbol. It's telling you something. There's something there for you to chew on mentally. It's not just the fat and the blubber from your online, your reality shows and whatnot.
All right, and in regards to why this is important, to recognize what's going on from a warfare perspective is this: if you don't know the difference between a symptom and a problem, then there's no way to form an actual solution. So therefore, the embodiment of what symbols are in terms of language and in terms of your connection with everything else will never be there. If you don't know how to distinguish the difference between a symptom and a problem, then what happens, at best, you go after symptoms, and then what you do is suppress. And then we tend to suppress symptoms and think that we're solving problems because we are not cognizant of the symbol. I'm sorry, we're not aware of what's actually happening in terms of the fact that the actual symptom is not the same thing as the problem itself. And so because the symptom and the problem become one accord, and you think they're both the same, then you find yourself lost in the wilderness. You find yourself neutralized. You find yourself not realizing that something that has an appeal, there's a deeper meaning behind it. There is an actual meaning and an actual definition behind it. And so from that standpoint, we have to know that we are at war. We have to know that this replacement reduction warfare strategy that's in place, that is being used against us, is the very thing that disconnects us from each other, which when they disconnect us from each other, now we're living off of what's called the individuality complex. And what's matters to me is all about me. And I don't have, nor do I share a connection with the rest of the world, yet alone my brethren and sister. So since I don't share a connection with them, I'm not going to be able to see God in myself. I'm not going to be able to operate as a holy being that is able to navigate the world and see symbology for what it is, which is basically language, which, you know, is recoded in mathematics. So from that standpoint, when we don't know we're at war, when we don't know between a problem and a symptom, then we will remain lost and disconnected from power. And being disconnected from power, you always be inferior and a slave.
True indeed.
Let me throw this in real quick, just real quick. We have to take a page from the entire rest of the universe, all of it, in that nowhere in nature, nowhere in no system of governance by humanity, in no, flower and bee relationship, nothing in the universe exists without a purpose. Nothing. Everything has a reason for being. Flowers are there to enable the bees to eat, to accumulate honey and do their thing. Bees exist to pollinate and cross-pollinate the flowers. There's a relationship and there's a reason for everything being. And the only things that exist without purpose, without reason, are those things that are about to become extinct. Things that exist for no purpose and no reason don't exist for very long. They go away really, really quickly. And again, that's an idea that you can look at in any place, anywhere, whether you're a student of history, of science, of milk, of bread, of tuna fish, of fishing, of your agriculturals, whatever it is. That idea that everything has a reason, has its place, has its purpose within reality is something that's a truth across the board. And if we are at a point where the things that we have to offer and contribute are without reason and without purpose, that reflects on us, saying that we have no reason and no purpose. And if that's the case, then we're going to be very much on that same trajectory as anything else without a purpose.
We really need it. We need to really bathe in blackness for a while, but I wish we'd get the bath over with. We are essentially an African people. Bathe in blackness. Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are. We are essentially an African people. Bathe in blackness. And we relate to the millions of African people throughout the world. Bathe in blackness. I'd like to begin by establishing some kind of a frame of reference Exactly what are we talking about? We are essentially an African people. Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are.
From the top of your head to the soles of your feet.
And I'm saying that black people need a measurement of the role that they have played in history. And I'm saying that
from the top of your head to the soles of your feet.
We are essentially an African people. Black tells you how you look, but don't tell you who you are. Black people need a measurement of the role that they have played in history. From the origin of man in Africa to the present time. You can see what the Africans achieved and what the Africans not only achieved within Africa, but the conflicts among African and how these conflicts were settled.
I never said unapologetically black. I said unapologetically African.
Egypt was invaded from within Africa, which began the decline. That was the Kushite invasion, led by that magnificent trio of black generals, Castor, Piyanki, and Taharqa. Egypt was invaded from within Africa. Black people need a measurement of the role that they have played in history.
I said unapologetically African.
Black tells you how you look, but it don't tell you who you are.
I never said unapologetically black.
When blackness is a state of mind, a state of attitude, a state of approach to things.
Unapologetically African.
We've been everything in history from Saint to Baffour. We're a complete people, and we need to start looking at ourselves as a complete people.
Unapologetically African.
Black people need a measurement, bathed in black, of the role that they have played in history.
Unapologetically African.
Bathed in black, start looking at ourselves as a complete people.